The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor 3 feet from my shoes, and I didn't even flinch anymore. After 6 months working at Aurelio's, the kind of restaurant where a single bottle of wine cost more than my monthly rent, I'd learned to anticipate chaos dressed in $1,000 suits. "Clean that up," Marco, the floor manager, hissed as he swept past me with a tray of oysters destined for table 7. I grabbed my cleaning kit and headed toward the glittering shards, weaving between tables where Chicago's elite laughed and schemed over 17-course tasting menus. The Friday night crowd was particularly vicious. Politicians, CEOs, and the kind of men whose handshakes sealed deals that would never see daylight. I was on my knees, carefully picking up glass, when I felt that electric shift in the air that happens when someone truly dangerous enters a room. The restaurant went quiet, not silent, but muted, like someone had turned down the volume on all the ambient noise. Conversations continued, but voices dropped. Silverware still clinked against china, but more carefully. Even Marco stopped barking orders at the kitchen staff. I looked up. He stood in the entrance, flanked by 2 men in dark suits, who scanned the room with the professional detachment of people paid to kill. But I barely noticed them. My entire focus narrowed to the man in the center. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone, all sharp angles and brutal beauty. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than my car, but it was the way he carried himself that made my breath catch. Pure, unapologetic power. The kind of man who'd never asked for anything in his life because people simply gave him what he wanted, or suffered the consequences. His gaze swept across the restaurant with cold assessment, and for one terrifying moment, those dark eyes locked on mine. I was still kneeling on the floor, frozen with a piece of load, broken glass in my hand, and I couldn't look away. The intensity in that stare pinned me in place like a butterfly under glass. Something flickered in his expression, curiosity, maybe, or recognition of something I couldn't name. Then Marco was there, breaking the spell, his voice obsequious in a way that made my skin crawl. "Mr. Moretti, welcome. Your usual table is ready." Moretti. The name detonated in my mind like a grenade. Dominic Moretti. Even I, who deliberately avoided the news and kept my head down in this city, knew that name. The Moretti family didn't just run Chicago's underworld, they were Chicago's underworld. Drugs, weapons, politicians, judges, all of it flowed through their hands like water. And the man now being escorted to the private alcove in the back, the man who'd looked at me like he could see straight through to my bones, was the head of it all. I forced myself to breathe, to finish cleaning up the broken glass, to stand on legs that suddenly felt unsteady. I dumped the shards in the trash and returned to my station behind the bar, trying to ignore the way my hands trembled. "Breathe, Isla," whispered Carmen, the other waitress on shift. She'd been at Aurelio's for 3 years and had the survival instincts of a gazelle on the Serengeti. "Don't look at his table. Don't even think about his table. Pretend he doesn't exist." "Who usually serves him?" I asked. "Marco himself. Always Marco. And you stay far, far away." But the universe, as I'd learned over my 26 years of mostly terrible luck, had a cruel sense of humor. 20 minutes later, Marco appeared at my elbow, his face pale and pinched. "Isla, Mr. Moretti wants you to serve his table tonight." My stomach dropped. "What? Why?" "He asked for you specifically." The brunette waitress with the green eyes. Marco grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "You listen to me. You smile. You serve. You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not make eye contact. You do exactly what he says. Do you understand?" I understood that I had no choice. The walk to Dominic Moretti's table felt like walking to the gallows. The private alcove was separated from the main dining room by frosted glass panels and heavy velvet curtains, creating an intimate space that felt more like a confessional than a restaurant booth. He sat alone, though his 2 guards stood at attention on either side of the entrance. He'd removed his jacket, and his white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a glimpse of golden skin and the edge of a tattoo I couldn't quite make out. He looked up as I approached, and that same intense focus from before settled over me like a physical weight. "Good evening, Mr. Moretti." My voice came out steadier than I'd expected. "Can I start you with something to drink?" "Scotch. Neat. The Macallan, 25. His voice was exactly what I'd imagined, deep, smooth, with an edge of gravel that suggested either too many cigarettes or too much shouting. Probably both. "And sit down." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Sit." He gestured to the seat across from him. Not a request, a command. I glanced back toward the main dining room, toward Marco, toward any excuse to refuse. But Marco was watching with wide, terrified eyes, and I knew that whatever this was, I had to play along. I sat. Up close, Dominic Moretti was even more devastating. Mid-30s, maybe, with a face that belonged on a Roman coin proud nose, strong jaw, lips that were almost cruel in their perfection. But it was his eyes that trapped me. Dark, nearly black, and absolutely merciless. "What's your name?" he asked. "Isla. Isla Bennett. How long have you worked here, Isla Bennett?" 6 months. He leaned back, studying me with an intensity that made me want to squirm. "You don't belong here," I bristled despite my fear. "I'm a good waitress. That's not what I meant." The ghost of a smile touched his lips there and gone so fast I might have imagined it. "You're smart, educated. I can tell by the way you carry yourself, the way you speak. So what's a woman like you doing serving champagne to people who don't deserve it?" The question was too personal, too probing, and I should have deflected. Should have smiled politely and excused myself to get his drink. But something about the way he asked, like he genuinely wanted to know, like my answer actually mattered, made me reckless. "Student loans," I said, "and medical bills. My mother had cancer. She died 2 years ago, but the debt didn't die with her." Something shifted in his expression. Not pity, I'd learned to recognize pity, to hate it. This was different. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. "I'm sorry," he said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. "Thank you." I stood, needing to escape this strange conversation, before I said something even more foolish. "I'll get your scotch." "Wait." I froze. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a money clip thick with $100 bills. He peeled off 10 $1,000 and set them on the table. "That's your tip," he said, before I've even ordered. No strings attached. I stared at the money, my mind reeling. $1,000. I could make my rent this month and still have enough left over for groceries that weren't ramen noodles. I could pay down some of my credit card debt. I could breathe. But I'd lived in Chicago long enough to know that men like Dominic Moretti didn't give away money with no strings attached. "I can't accept that," I said quietly. His eyebrows rose slightly. "Why not?" "Because nothing's free. Especially not from men like you." Silence stretched between us, dangerous and electric. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed a low, genuine sound that transformed his face from brutal to breathtaking. "Men like me," he repeated. "Smart girl." "You're right, of course. Nothing's free in this world." He stood, towering over me, and stepped close enough that I could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke. "So let me buy something from you instead." My pulse hammered in my throat. "I'm not for sale. Not you. Just an answer to a question." He tilted his head, those dark eyes boring into mine. "What do you want most in this world, Isla Bennett?" The question caught me off guard. No one had asked me that in years. No one cared what I wanted. I was just the waitress, the woman cleaning up other people's messes, surviving day to day with no thought for dreams or desires. But standing there, with Dominic Moretti looking at me like I was the only person in the universe, the truth spilled out before I could stop it. "Freedom?" I whispered. "I want freedom." His eyes darkened with something I couldn't name. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and brushed his thumb across my cheekbone in a touch so gentle it made my breath catch. "Freedom," he repeated softly, "the one thing money can't truly buy." Then he stepped back, the moment breaking like a spell, and returned to his seat. "Thank you for your honesty, Isla. You can get my scotch now." I fled. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Dominic Moretti ate his meal in silence, departed with his guards before dessert, and left $5,000 in cash on the table. Marco let me keep all of it. I walked home that night with more money than I'd earned in 3 months, my mind spinning with questions I couldn't answer. What had just happened? Why had he singled me out? Why had he asked me that question? And why couldn't I stop thinking about the way he'd touched my face, like I was something precious instead of broken? I climbed the 4 flights to my tiny studio apartment, exhausted and confused, and collapsed into bed still wearing my uniform. When I woke the next morning to pounding on my door, I assumed it was my landlord demanding rent early, or my neighbor complaining about noise I hadn't made. I wasn't prepared for the man in the expensive suit holding a small wooden box. "Isla Bennett?" he asked. "Yes. Delivery for you. Sign here, please." I signed with numb fingers, took the box, and closed the door with my hip. It was surprisingly heavy, mahogany polished to a mirror shine, with a small envelope tucked under the silver clasp. My hands shook as I opened the envelope and pulled out a single card embossed with black ink. You said you wanted freedom. The helicopter is yours. Fueled and ready at Signature Flight Support Midway Airport. The pilot will take you anywhere in the world you want to go. No conditions, no strings, just freedom. D.M. I opened the box. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was a single key on a platinum chain. And just like that, I knew my life would never be the same. I stood in my apartment for 20 minutes, staring at the key like it might bite me. A helicopter. He'd given me a helicopter. Men like Dominic Moretti didn't give gifts, they made investments. But in what? Me. Why would one of the most dangerous men in Chicago care about a broke waitress's dreams of freedom? The key seemed to pulse in my palm, heavy with promise and threat in equal measure. I should throw it away, return it, pretend last night never happened and go back to my safe, suffocating life of student loans and double shifts and slowly drowning in debt that would never end. But God, I was so tired of drowning. Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed my phone and called Aurelio's. Marco, it's Isla. I can't come in today. I'm sick. His response was immediate and sharp. You can't call out on a Saturday. We're fully booked. I'm sorry. I'll make it up next week. I hung up before he could argue, before guilt could change my mind. Then I grabbed my jacket, the only one I owned that didn't have holes, and headed for the door. The cab ride to Midway Airport cost me $43 I couldn't afford. But what was debt compared to whatever was waiting for me in that hangar? The driver kept glancing at me in the rear view mirror like he was trying to figure out if I was running towards something or away from it. I wasn't sure I knew the answer myself. Signature Flight Support was everything I'd expected from the private aviation world I'd only ever seen in movies. Sleek glass walls, leather furniture, and beautiful people who looked like they'd never worried about anything more serious than which vacation home to visit. I'm here about a helicopter, I told the woman at the desk, feeling ridiculous. Under Dominic Moretti? Her professional smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. Maybe fear. Of course, Miss Bennett. Mr. Moretti called ahead. If you'll follow me? She led me through the terminal and out onto the tarmac, where dozens of private jets and helicopters gleamed in the October sunlight. We stopped in front of a sleek black helicopter that looked like it belonged in a military operation, not ferrying random waitresses around the country. This is yours for the day, the woman said. Your pilot is James. He's been with Mr. Moretti for 8 years and has impeccable credentials. He'll take you anywhere within a 2,000-mile radius. 2,000 miles. I could reach the ocean. Either ocean, or the mountains, or just away. How do I gestured helplessly at the helicopter, at the absurdity of the entire situation. Just tell James where you want to go, Mr. Moretti has taken care of everything else. She handed me a leather portfolio. This contains maps, suggestions, and a phone number to reach him directly should you need anything. Of course there was a phone number. James turned out to be a quiet man in his 50s with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone used to dealing with nervous passengers. He helped me into the helicopter, showed me how the headset worked, and asked the question I still didn't have an answer for. Where would you like to go, Miss Bennett? I looked out at Chicago stretching below us, the city that had chewed me up and spit me out for 6 years. The city where I'd buried my mother and my dreams and any hope of something better. Somewhere I can see the stars, I heard myself say. Somewhere quiet. James smiled. I know just the place. We lifted off, and I watched Chicago shrink below us until it was nothing but steel and glass and tiny cars moving through streets that had felt like prison walls. For the first time in years, I could breathe. We flew north for 2 hours, the landscape below transforming from urban sprawl to farmland to dense forests painted in autumn gold and crimson. James eventually set us down in a clearing near a lake so blue it looked artificial, surrounded by trees and absolute silence. There's a cabin about a 1/4 mile that way, he said, pointing. Fully stocked. Fireplace works. I'll be back at sunset to take you home, or I can leave you overnight if you prefer. Your call? I climbed out on shaky legs, the key still clutched in my fist. James. Why is he doing this? The pilot's expression was carefully neutral. Mr. Moretti doesn't explain himself to me, ma'am. But I've worked for him a long time, and I've never seen him do something like this before. Maybe he just wanted to do something kind. Men like him don't do kind things without a reason. Maybe you should ask him yourself. James gestured to the leather portfolio. His number's in there. He's expecting your call. Then he climbed back into the helicopter. And I was alone. The cabin was exactly what he'd promised, small but beautiful. All exposed wood beams and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. There was food in the kitchen, wine in the fridge, and a stack of books by the fireplace that looked like they'd been chosen specifically for me. Philosophy, poetry, fiction that explored the nature of freedom and choice. He'd been listening last night. Really listening. I spent the afternoon walking the lakeshore, watching the trees shed their leaves like the world was undressing for winter. I hadn't realized how much noise I'd been carrying in my head, the constant anxiety about money, about survival, about the future pressing down on me like a physical weight, until it was gone. This was what freedom felt like. Space, silence, choice, and it was a gift from a monster. As the sun began to set, painting the lake in shades of gold and blood, I finally opened the leather portfolio and found the phone number written in black ink on heavy cardstock. My hands shook as I dialed. He answered on the second ring. Did you run? Not hello. Not how are you. Just that question, asked in that same dark voice that had haunted my dreams. I'm at a lake, I said. Somewhere north of Chicago. There are trees. The Wisconsin property. Good choice. I could hear the smile in his voice. Are you calling to thank me or curse me? I haven't decided yet. I wrapped my free arm around myself, suddenly cold despite the jacket. Why did you do this? I told you. You said you wanted freedom, so I gave it to you. Nobody gives away helicopters to strangers. You're not a stranger, Isla. The way he said my name low and intimate, like he was tasting it sent heat down my spine. I know exactly who you are. Isla Marie Bennett, 26 years old, bachelor's degree in literature from Northwestern, graduated summa cum laude despite working 2 jobs to pay for it. Your mother was Elizabeth Bennett, high school English teacher, died of ovarian cancer 23 months ago. You took on $70,000 in medical debt trying to save her. You're 2 months behind on rent? You eat ramen 4 nights a week? You haven't bought new clothes in a year? You're drowning, and you're too proud to ask anyone for help. My blood turned to ice. You investigated me. Of course I did. No apology in his tone. I wanted to understand why a woman like you would work in a place like Aurelio's. Why you looked at me with fear but not worship. Do you know how rare that is? People either want something from me or they're terrified of me. You were just honest. So this is what? Payment for my honesty? Anger was rising now, burning through the fear. You throw money at me and expect what? Gratitude? Loyalty? I expect nothing. His voice hardened. The helicopter is yours for today. After that, you can go back to your life and we never have to see each other again. Or, the word hung between us, dangerous and tempting. Or, I whispered, or you can have dinner with me, tomorrow night. Let me properly introduce myself instead of ambushing you at work. Let me take you somewhere beautiful and have an actual conversation. And then, if you want nothing to do with me, I'll respect that. But if you're even slightly curious about why I'm doing this, about what I see when I look at you, give me one evening. I know what you are, I said. I know what you do. Yes. And I know you're smart enough to understand that makes this incredibly dangerous for you. His voice dropped lower. But I also think you're brave enough to take the risk. Aren't you tired of being safe, Isla? Of choosing survival over living? I closed my eyes, hating how easily he'd read me, how perfectly he'd identified the thing I'd been running from for years. Not just poverty, but the slow death of living in fear. One dinner, I heard myself say. That's all. That's all I'm asking. Relief colored his tone. So subtle I almost missed it. I'll send a car tomorrow at 7. Wear something comfortable. And Isla? Yes. Thank you. For trusting me this much. I know what it cost you. He hung up before I could respond, leaving me standing in a cabin I couldn't afford, holding a key to a helicopter I'd never own, having just agreed to have dinner with the most dangerous man in Chicago. James returned at sunset as promised. During the flight back, I tried to make sense of what I was feeling. Fear. Yes. Confusion. Absolutely. But underneath it all, something else entirely, a thrill of anticipation that terrified me more than anything else. Dominic Moretti had investigated me, knew my secrets, my debts, my desperate circumstances, and instead of using them against me, He'd given me a day of freedom. What kind of monster did that? Or maybe the better question was, what did he want with me that required this much effort? I returned to my apartment just after 9, exhausted and wired in equal measure. The mahogany box with its platinum key sat on my kitchen counter, proof that today had actually happened. I picked up the key, let it dangle from its chain, and watched it spin in the lamplight. Tomorrow at 7, a car would arrive, and I would get in it, because Dominic Moretti was right about one thing. I was tired of being safe, tired of choosing survival over living, and even though every instinct screamed that this was a trap, that men like him destroyed women like me, I wanted to know what came next. I wanted to see what he saw when he looked at me. I wanted, just once, to be brave instead of scared, even if it destroyed me. The black Mercedes arrived at exactly 7 o'clock, sleek and predatory, idling at the curb like a panther waiting to pounce. The driver, one of the same guards who'd flanked Dominic at the restaurant, held the door open with mechanical efficiency. "Miss Bennett," he said. Not a greeting, a confirmation. I climbed in before I could change my mind. I'd agonized over what to wear, finally settling on the only dress I owned that wasn't a work uniform, a simple navy blue sheath I'd bought for my mother's funeral. Comfortable, like he'd requested, but it made me feel like I was dressed for mourning rather than whatever this was. The car glided through Chicago's streets, heading away from downtown toward the lake. We drove for 20 minutes in silence before pulling up to a building I recognized from magazines and news articles. The Azure, one of the most exclusive residential towers in the city. Penthouse condos started at 10 million. Of course, Dominic Moretti lived here. The guard escorted me through a private entrance, past a security checkpoint that looked more appropriate for a government facility than an apartment building, and into an elevator that required a keycard to operate. We rose in silence, my ears popping as we climbed higher and higher, until the doors finally opened directly into. I stepped out and forgot to breathe. The penthouse was enormous, all floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Chicago sprawled below like a glittering carpet of lights. The interior was masculine and elegant, dark wood, leather furniture, art on the walls that I recognized as actual Rothkos and Pollocks, not prints. A grand piano sat in one corner, a full bar in another, and everywhere, that sense of restrained power, of wealth so vast it didn't need to announce itself. Impressive, isn't it? I spun around. Dominic stood in the doorway to what I assumed was the kitchen, wearing dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned forearms marked with tattoos I couldn't quite make out. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd just showered, and he looked younger somehow, less the dangerous crime lord and more just a man. A devastatingly handsome man who'd invaded my life with helicopters and dinner invitations. I struggled for words that wouldn't sound either insulting or impressed. Very you. He smiled. A real smile that transformed his brutal features into something almost boyish. I'm not sure if that's a compliment or an insult. I haven't decided yet. Fair enough. He gestured toward the dining area, where a table had been set for 2, with white linens and flickering candles. I thought we'd eat here instead of a restaurant. More private. Less chance of being interrupted by people who want favors or my attention. He paused. But if that makes you uncomfortable, we can go somewhere public. I should have been afraid. Should have insisted on a restaurant full of witnesses. But somehow, standing in his space, seeing the careful way he was treating me like I was a skittish animal he didn't want to spook, I felt safe. Which was probably exactly what he wanted me to feel. Here is fine, I said. Relief flickered across his face. Good. I'm not much of a cook, but I make a decent pasta. I hope you're hungry. He'd cooked. Dominic Moretti, who probably had a dozen chefs on speed dial, had cooked dinner himself. The meal was simple but perfect homemade fettuccine with a cream sauce, fresh bread, a salad of greens I couldn't name but that tasted like summer. We ate at first in awkward silence, the weight of unasked questions hanging between us like fog. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. Why am I here, Dominic? He set down his fork, those dark eyes finding mine. Because I wanted to see you again. Because Friday night, when you looked at me and told me you wanted freedom, you broke something open in me I thought I'd sealed shut years ago. I don't understand. Neither do I. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that seemed uncharacteristically uncertain. You want honesty? Here's honesty. I've built my entire life around control. Every person in my orbit is there because I put them there. Every outcome is calculated, every risk is managed. And then you. You looked at me like I was dangerous but not inevitable. Like you had a choice in whether to be afraid of me or not. I did have a choice. Most people don't think they do. He picked up his wine glass, studying the deep red liquid like it held answers. Do you know what I do, Isla? Really do? You run the Moretti family. Drugs, weapons, extortion. You control half of Chicago's underworld. That's the public version. The truth is more complicated. He met my eyes, his gaze steady and unflinching. My family has been in Chicago for 4 generations. My great-grandfather came over from Sicily with nothing but the clothes on his back and a willingness to do what it took to survive. He built an empire. My grandfather expanded it. My father, his jaw tightened. My father was a monster who believed power came from fear. He ruled through violence and cruelty. And by the time I was old enough to understand what that meant, I'd already learned to be just like him. What changed? He died. I was 23, fresh out of business school, and suddenly I was running an organization I'd been groomed for, but never actually wanted. He set down the wine glass with careful precision. I spent the next 10 years trying to legitimize as much as possible. We still operate in gray areas. I won't lie to you about that. But the drugs, the weapons, the worst of it, I've been systematically shutting it down. Converting assets into legitimate businesses. Real estate, construction, investment firms. I'm trying to build something clean for the next generation. That's not what I expected you to say. What did you expect? For me to brag about being a criminal? He smiled without humor. I'm not proud of what I am, Isla. I'm just realistic about the fact that I can't escape it. The name Moretti means something in this city, and that something is blood and power. I can't change my family's history, but I can try to change its future. I studied him, searching for the lie, for the manipulation. But all I saw was exhaustion and a strange, desperate kind of honesty. Why tell me this? I asked softly. Why not just, I don't know, seduce me with money and power and pretty gifts? Because you asked for freedom, and I understand what that means. Real freedom requires truth. Informed choice. He leaned forward, his intensity pinning me in place. I want you to know exactly what you'd be getting into if you chose to spend time with me. The danger, the complications, the fact that my enemies would see you as a target the moment they realized you mattered to me. I don't matter to you. We've barely met, don't I? His voice dropped lower, intimate and rough. Then why have I been thinking about you every moment since Friday night? Why did I spend yesterday morning having my people find the most beautiful place I own so you could have a few hours of peace? Why am I sitting here terrified that you're going to walk out that door and I'll never see you again? My breath caught. The vulnerability in his voice, in his eyes, was so at odds with everything I thought I knew about him that I didn't know how to respond. I scare you, he continued. I know I do. I can see it in the way you're sitting, like you're ready to run at any moment. But Isla, you scare me too, because I spent 10 years building walls around myself, convinced I didn't need anyone, didn't want anyone. And then you looked at me with those green eyes and said you wanted freedom, and suddenly all I could think about was what it would feel like to be the person who gave it to you. You can't give someone freedom, Dominic. That's not how it works. Then let me help you take it. He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of mine and offering, not a demand. Let me pay off your debts. All of them. The medical bills, the student loans, the rent you're behind on. Let me give you the breathing room to figure out what you actually want to do with your life instead of just surviving it. I stared at his hand, at the offer implicit in that almost touch. And what do you want in return? Your time, your company, the chance to know you. His fingers moved the last inch, brushing against mine, and electricity sparked up my arm. I'm not asking you to be my mistress or my girlfriend or any label that would make you uncomfortable. I just want this. Dinners where we talk, days where I can show you beautiful things, moments where I get to see you smile instead of looking so tired and sad. That sounds like dating. Then, we're dating. He smiled, and it was devastating, warm and genuine, and tinged with hope. If you'll have me. Every logical part of my brain screamed that this was a trap. That men like Dominic Moretti didn't offer altruism wrapped in pretty words. That accepting his help would put me in his debt, in his power, in his bed. But God, I was so tired of logic, so tired of being practical and careful and slowly drowning in a life I'd never chosen. I need to think about it, I said finally. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. We finished dinner in a silence that felt less awkward than contemplative. Dominic told me about his efforts to legitimize the family businesses, about the charities he funded secretly, about his younger sister who was studying medicine in California and knew nothing about the family's real operations. I told him about my mother, about the books I'd loved in college, about the small dreams I'd given up when reality became too heavy to carry them. It was easy, talking to him. Too easy, like we'd known each other for years instead of days. When the car dropped me back at my apartment just before midnight, I felt like I'd stepped out of a dream. The evening had been so normal, so intimate, that I'd almost forgotten who Dominic really was. Almost. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, my mind spinning with questions I couldn't answer. Inside, I found an envelope that had been slipped under my door. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a cashier's check for $93,000, the exact amount of my combined debts, and a note in that same black ink. Think about it. But while you're thinking, you shouldn't have to worry about money. This is a gift, not a payment. No strings, no obligations, just freedom to choose. Call me when you decide. I sank onto my second-hand couch, the check clutched in my hands, and realized with absolute certainty that I was already caught. The trap wasn't the money or the helicopter or the dinner. The trap was how much I wanted to say yes. I didn't cash the check for 3 days. It sat on my kitchen counter like a live grenade, beautiful and dangerous, while I went through the motions of my life. I showed up for my shifts at Aurelio's, smiled at customers, cleaned up broken glass, and pretended my entire world hadn't shifted on its axis. But I couldn't stop thinking about him. About the way he'd looked at me across that candlelit table, like I was something precious he didn't know how to hold without breaking. About the vulnerability in his voice when he'd admitted I scared him. About the careful way he'd offered me freedom, while acknowledging it would tie me to him in ways neither of us fully understood. On the 4th day, I called my bank and arranged to deposit the check. On the 5th day, I called him. He answered immediately, like he'd been waiting. Isla. Just my name, but the relief in his voice made my chest tight. I deposited the check. I said, "Good." A pause. Does that mean? It means I want to see you again. It means I'm terrified and probably making the worst decision of my life. But I want to see where this goes. I took a breath. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't lie to me. Ever. I can handle danger. I can handle complicated. But I can't handle being manipulated or kept in the dark. If this thing between us is going to work, I need honesty. Even when it's ugly. I promise. His voice was solemn, like he was taking a vow. Truth. Always. Even when it hurts. Okay. Then, what happens now? Now? I could hear the smile in his voice. Now I take you to dinner again. And again. I show you parts of my world you've never seen. I learn what makes you laugh, and what makes you feel safe. I court you properly, Isla, the way you deserve. Dominic Moretti doesn't seem like the courting type. Maybe not. But for you, I'll be whoever I need to be. The courtship, as he called it, began slowly. At first it was just dinners, sometimes at his penthouse, sometimes at small, hidden restaurants where he was known and protected. He never pushed for more than conversation, never demanded physical intimacy beyond the occasional brush of fingers or the way he'd help me into my coat, his hands lingering on my shoulders. But the intensity was always there, simmering beneath every word, every glance, the promise of something volcanic waiting to erupt. He sent me flowers, not roses, but strange, beautiful blooms I couldn't name. He sent books he thought I'd like, always with a note in his strong, slashing handwriting explaining why he'd chosen them. He cleared my debts quietly, one by one, until the crushing weight of financial panic that had defined my life for years simply vanished. And slowly, I began to trust him. That's when everything went wrong. It was a Tuesday night, 2 weeks after our first dinner at his penthouse. I was walking home from the grocery store, bags in hand, when a black SUV pulled up beside me. Not Dominic's car. I knew his vehicles by now. 3 men climbed out, and I knew immediately they were dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with Dominic's cultivated menace. These men were rough, crude weapons without polish. Isla Bennett? The largest one asked, his accent thick with Eastern European vowels. I ran. I didn't think, didn't question, just dropped my groceries and ran, my heart exploding in my chest, my breath coming in gasps. I could hear them behind me, their footsteps heavy on the pavement, and I knew I wouldn't make it, knew they'd catch me in seconds. Then a car screeched to a halt beside me, a different black SUV, and Dominic's voice cut through my panic like a blade. "Get in! Now." I dove into the back seat and he pulled me against him, his arms iron bands around my body. As the driver accelerated so hard I was thrown back against the leather seats. "It's okay," Dominic murmured into my hair, his voice steady even as his heart hammered against my cheek. "You're safe. I've got you. How did you— I've had men watching you since the first night." He pulled back enough to look at me, his face hard with fury and fear in equal measure. "I knew this was a risk. Knew my enemies would figure out you mattered to me. I'm sorry, Isla. I'm so goddamn sorry." "Who were they?" "Volkov's men." The name was spat like a curse. "Sergei Volkov runs the Russian operations in Chicago. We've had disagreements about territory. He must have decided you were a way to get to me." I was shaking now, adrenaline crashing through my system, and Dominic held me tighter, his hands stroking my hair, my back, like he could physically hold me together. "What happens now?" I whispered, his jaw clenched. "Now you come home with me. My penthouse is secure, armed guards, bulletproof glass, security systems that would make the Secret Service jealous. You'll be safe there until I handle this." "Handle this how?" He met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw the monster everyone else feared. "However I need to. Volkov just declared war by touching you, and I will end him for it." The penthouse had transformed into a fortress by the time we arrived. Men in suits and earpieces were stationed at every entrance, their weapons visible and ready. Dominic swept me through the security checkpoints and directly into his private quarters, a section of the penthouse I'd never seen before. His bedroom was massive, all dark wood and leather, dominated by a king-size bed that looked like it belonged in a castle. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered the same stunning view of Chicago, but now the city felt threatening instead of beautiful. "You'll stay here?" Dominic said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "This room is the most secure in the building. Reinforced walls, panic buttons, direct line to my personal security. You'll be safe." "What about you?" He turned to face me, fully, and the fury in his expression made me step back. "I'm going to do what I should have done months ago. I'm going to remind Sergei Volkov why you don't touch what's mine." "I'm not yours," I said automatically, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were a lie. Somewhere between the helicopter and the dinners and the careful way he'd rebuilt my life piece by piece, I'd become his. Maybe not in the way he owned businesses or controlled territories, but in the way that mattered, the way that meant his enemies could hurt him by hurting me. Dominic crossed to me in 3 long strides and cupped my face in his hands. "Yes," he said softly, fiercely. "You are. You've been mine since the moment you told me you wanted freedom, and I realized I wanted to be the one to give it to you. And I protect what's mine, Isla, no matter the cost." Then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle or exploratory or tentative. It was claiming, consuming, a brand of ownership that should have terrified me but instead set every nerve in my body on fire. His mouth moved over mine with bruising intensity, his hands sliding into my hair, tilting my head back so he could deepen the kiss, until I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the heat of him burning through every defense I'd ever built. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard, and his eyes were black with desire and fury. "Stay here," he ordered. "My sister Gabriella will come sit with you. Don't open the door for anyone else. Don't go near the windows. Don't leave this room until I come back for you. Do you understand?" I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. He pressed one more kiss to my forehead, gentle this time, reverent, and then he was gone, leaving me alone in his bedroom with the taste of him on my lips and the terrifying knowledge that I'd just stepped fully into his world. And there was no going back. Gabriella Moretti arrived 30 minutes later with a bottle of wine and a smile that was pure. Sunshine completely at odds with the armed guards flanking her. She was beautiful in a way that seemed effortless. Long dark hair, warm brown eyes, and a laugh that filled the room like music. She looked nothing like her brother except for the intensity in her gaze, that same focused attention that made you feel like you were the only person in the universe. "So you're the woman who's made my brother completely insane," she said, pouring us both generous glasses of red wine. "I have to say, I never thought I'd see the day." "I don't think I've made him insane," I protested weakly. "Are you kidding? He's had people following you 24/7 for 2 weeks. He canceled 3 business meetings yesterday because he wanted to have lunch with you." And tonight, he's declaring war on the Volkov family because someone dared to threaten you." She grinned. "Honey, you've made him completely unhinged, and I'm here for it." Despite everything, the fear, the adrenaline still singing through my veins, the knowledge that somewhere in the city Dominic was doing violence on my behalf, I found myself smiling. "You don't seem concerned about the war part." Her expression sobered. "Dom knows what he's doing. He's been preparing for a confrontation with Volkov for months. This just accelerated the timeline." She took a sip of wine. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry you got dragged into this. Dom tried so hard to keep his world separate from any chance at normal happiness. I think that's why he's been alone for so long." "He told me about your father," I said carefully. "About what he was like." Gabriella's face went cold. "Our father was a monster. He believed power came from making people fear you more than death itself. Dom protected me from the worst of it, but..." She looked away, her jaw tight. "Let's just say I understand why Dom does what he does, why he's trying to change things, and why he's so careful about who he lets in. You're not part of the business, are you?" "God, no." Dom made sure of that. "I'm in California, studying to be a doctor, blissfully ignorant of most of what the family actually does." She met my eyes. "That's what he wants, you know. A future where the Moretti name means something other than blood and fear. He's been systematically dismantling our father's empire for years, trying to build something legitimate. But it's slow and dangerous, and there are people who don't want things to change. Like Volkov." "Like Volkov," she agreed. "And others. The old guard who profited from the chaos and violence. Dom has enemies in his own organization, people who think he's weak for trying to legitimize. Tonight's going to make things complicated." I thought about that kiss, about the barely controlled fury in Dominic's eyes, about the way he'd said, "I protect what's mine," like it was a vow written in blood. "He's not weak," I said quietly. Gabriella smiled. "No, he's not. He's the most dangerous person I know, which is why I sleep better knowing he's on my side." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "And now he's on yours too. Welcome to the family, Isla. It's going to be one hell of a ride." We talked through the night, Gabriella telling me stories about growing up Moretti, the legitimate parts at least. The family dinners that felt normal except for the armed guards. The birthday parties at estates that were more fortress than home. The strange duality of being raised in enormous wealth, while knowing that wealth came from sources you were never supposed to ask about. "Dom raised me more than our parents did," she said around 2 a.m, the wine bottle empty between us. "After our mother died, I was 7, our father just checked out emotionally. He was physically there, but it was like living with a statue. Dom was only 15, but he made sure I had everything I needed. Helped me with homework, scared off terrible boyfriends, made sure I knew I was loved." Her eyes grew wet. "That's why I want this for him, you, happiness, something real that isn't tainted by the family business. He deserves that." "I don't know if I can give him that," I admitted. "I'm nobody, a waitress with a literature degree and a mountain of debt he had to clear. What do I possibly have to offer someone like him?" "Are you serious?" Gabriella laughed. "Isla, you're the first person in 10 years who's looked at my brother and seen past the power and the fear. You're the first person who asked him for honesty instead of favors. You're the first person who made him feel like he could be something other than the monster our father created." She leaned forward. "That's everything. That's all he's ever wanted." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just held her hand and watched the city lights blur through the windows until exhaustion finally dragged me under. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and Dominic sitting in a chair beside the bed, watching me sleep. He looked terrible. His white shirt was spattered with blood, not his, I realized with a jolt, and his knuckles were bruised and swollen. There was a cut above his left eyebrow that someone had butterfly bandaged, and exhaustion carved deep lines around his eyes. But he was smiling. "It's over," he said simply. I sat up, my heart pounding. "What happened?" "Volkov is dead. His second in command has agreed to pull back from Chicago entirely in exchange for their lives. The territory is ours." He said it matter-of-factly, like he was discussing a business merger instead of a massacre. "You're safe now, Isla. I made sure of it." I should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the blood on his shirt, from the casual way he'd just admitted to killing people. But all I felt was relief so profound it made me lightheaded. "Are you okay?" I asked. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe? Or wonder. "You're asking if I'm okay? After everything that happened last night?" "You're covered in blood." None of it's mine. He stood and crossed to the bed, sitting on the edge close enough that I could smell gunpowder and smoke beneath his cologne. I'm sorry you had to wake up to this. I should have cleaned up first, but I needed to see you. I needed to know you were still here, still real. I reached out and touched his face, my fingers gentle on the cut above his eyebrow. I'm real. I'm here. He caught my hand and brought it to his lips, pressing a kiss to my palm that felt more intimate than the kiss we'd shared last night. I killed 12 people for you, he said quietly. 12 men who thought they could use you to hurt me, and I would do it again without hesitation. Does that frighten you? Yes, I admitted. But not the way you think. It frightens me how much I don't care that you did it. How relieved I am that you're okay and they're not. What does that make me? Mine, he said simply. Then he kissed me again, and this time it was slow, deep, a claiming that tasted like blood and salvation. His hand slid into my hair, tilting my head back, and I could feel the tremor in his fingers, the fear and relief and desperate need all tangled together. Stay, he whispered against my lips. Not just today. Move in here. Let me keep you safe. Let me have you close where I can protect you, where I know no one can hurt you. Please, Isla. It was the please that undid me, the vulnerability in that single word, the admission that this powerful, dangerous man was asking instead of taking. Okay, I breathed. Yes. His arms came around me then, crushing me against his chest, and I felt him shake with relief, or emotion, or both. Thank you, he murmured into my hair. Thank you for trusting me. For staying. For not running when you saw what I really am. I saw what you really are, the first night we met, I said. Everything since has just been confirmation. He pulled back enough to look at me, his dark eyes searching mine. And what do you see? I traced the line of defriend, his jaw, the curve of his lips, the scar that cut through his left eyebrow. A man trying to be better than his history. A man who protected his sister and is trying to protect me. A man who's lonely and fierce and capable of terrible things, but who wants to be capable of beautiful things too. Isla. My name was a prayer, a confession. I'm falling in love with you. I know it's too soon. I know it's insane, but I need you to know. Before you move in here, before you tie yourself to me any further, I'm in love with you. And that makes you the most dangerous person in my life, because my enemies will always try to use you against me. Always. Then we'll be dangerous together, I said, and kissed him again. This time when we came together, it was with the understanding that everything had changed, that I wasn't just staying for a night, but stepping fully into his world with all its beauty and brutality, that I was choosing him, and he was choosing me back. Moving into Dominic's penthouse should have felt like a fairy tale. The closet he cleared for me was bigger than my old apartment. He installed a library in one of the spare rooms, filling it with first editions and rare books he thought I'd love. Every morning I woke up to coffee made exactly how I liked it, and the view of Chicago spreading below like a kingdom we ruled together. But fairy tales don't prepare you for the reality of loving a dangerous man. The first crack appeared 2 weeks after I moved in. I was reading in the library one of the Jane Austen first editions Dominic had surprised me with when raised voices echoed from his study down the hall. I'd learned quickly that when Dominic had business meetings, I was expected to make myself scarce. But this wasn't the controlled negotiation tone I'd heard before. This was anger, raw and barely leashed. You're compromised, Dom. Everyone can see it. The voice was unfamiliar, thick with a Boston accent. Ever since you brought her into your home, you've been soft, distracted. The men are starting to question whether you still have what it takes. Careful, Marco. Dominic's voice was cold as winter. Question my leadership again and you'll find out exactly what I still have. I'm not questioning. I'm stating facts. You canceled the San Diego acquisition because it conflicted with some dinner reservation. You turned down the Colombo contract because it made you uncomfortable. And now you're telling us you want to accelerate the legitimization timeline? We have operations that depend on... I don't care. Dominic cut him off. Things are changing. We're changing. And anyone who has a problem with that can find employment elsewhere. Silence. Then, is she worth it? Worth potentially fracturing the family? Worth the target you've painted on both your backs? Get out of my home, Marco. We're done here. Footsteps. A door slamming. Then quiet. I found Dominic an hour later on the balcony, smoking a cigarette, a habit I'd never seen before, and staring out at the city with an expression that made my chest ache. I didn't know you smoked, I said softly. He looked over, surprise flickering across his face. I quit years ago. Only fall back on it when I'm stressed. He stubbed out the cigarette with more force than necessary. You heard that, I assume? Some of it. Who's Marco? My father's former consigliere. One of the old guard who thinks I'm destroying everything my family built. He turned to face me fully. He's not entirely wrong. About you destroying things? About me being compromised. About you making me soft. He reached out and pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me like he was trying to absorb me into his body. Before you, I would have handled Volkov differently. Cleaner. More brutally. I would have sent a message that ensured no one ever threatened me again. But I was so terrified of losing you that I got sloppy. 3 of my men were injured because I rushed in instead of planning properly. They're okay though, right? They're fine. But that's not the point. He pulled back enough to look at me, and the conflict in his eyes was devastating. I have hundreds of people depending on me, Isla. Men who've pledged their loyalty, who trust me to protect them and their families. And I'm starting to realize that I can't be the leader they need and the man you deserve. Something's gotta give. Fear spiked through me, sharp and immediate. Are you saying you want me to leave? God, no. He cupped my face in his hands, his touch achingly gentle. I'm saying I don't know how to balance this, how to be ruthless enough to keep everyone safe while being vulnerable enough to love you the way I want to. I spent 10 years building walls, and you've demolished them in weeks. It's terrifying. Good, I said, trying for levity. You should be terrified. I'm terrifying. He laughed, but it sounded broken. You have no idea how true that is. You're the only thing in this world that can actually destroy me, because you're the only thing I can't control or predict or manage. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. Marco's right. I am compromised. I would burn down everything I've built if it meant keeping you safe. That makes me weak. No. I grabbed his wrists, holding his hands against my face. That makes you human. Love isn't weakness, Dominic. It's the only thing that makes any of this worth it. You say that like love conquers all, doesn't it? Not in my world. His voice was heavy with regret. In my world, love gets you killed. The second crack appeared during a dinner party 3 weeks later. Dominic had business associates visiting from New York, not criminals, he assured me, but legitimate businessmen who were helping with the transition away from the family's darker operations. He wanted me there, wanted to show me off, wanted them to see that he was building toward a real future. I wore a dress he'd bought me, emerald silk that cost more than my old car, and played the role of devoted girlfriend, with a smile that felt increasingly brittle. The men were polite but dismissive, their conversations flowing around me like I wasn't there, until one of them, Victor something, with silver hair and cold eyes, turned his attention fully to me. Miss Bennett, Dominic tells us you studied literature. How? Quaint. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Tell me, do you find the reality of Dominic's business lives up to the romance novels? The table went quiet. I'm not sure what you mean, I said carefully. Come now. Pretty young woman, older powerful man, whirlwind romance. It's very 50 Shades, isn't it? I'm just curious how long before the novelty wears off and reality sets in. Dominic's hand found mine under the table, his grip tight enough to hurt. Victor, choose your next words very carefully. But I didn't need Dominic to fight this battle. I think, I said, my voice steady and cold, that you're confusing fiction with reality. My relationship with Dominic isn't a fantasy, it's 2 adults who see each other clearly and choose to be together anyway. The fact that you can't understand that says more about you than it does about us. Victor's smile turned predatory. Spirited. I can see the appeal. But tell me, Miss Bennett, do you actually understand what choosing to be together means in this context? Do you know what Dominic does? What he's done? How many people he's enough? Dominic stood, his voice cracking like a whip. This dinner is over. Get out. All of you. The men left in uncomfortable silence, and suddenly we were alone in the massive dining room with half-eaten meals and the wreckage of my first real introduction to Dominic's world. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Victor is an ass who thinks he can say whatever he wants because we need his connections. I'll cut ties tomorrow. Don't. I stood and crossed to him. Don't destroy business relationships because someone insulted me. I can handle it. I don't want you to have to handle it. I don't want you exposed to people like him, to comments like that, to any of this ugliness. He pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine. Maybe Marco was right. Maybe I should have kept you separate from all of this. It's too late for that. I'm already here, Already in this. I grabbed his face, forcing him to look at me. Stop trying to protect me from reality. I knew what you were when I moved in here. I chose this eyes wide open. Did you? Or did I seduce you with helicopters and promises and enough money to make your problems disappear? The question hung between us like poison. Is that what you think? I asked quietly. That I'm here because you bought me? I think... He closed his eyes. I think I'm terrified that you're going to wake up one day and realize what you've tied yourself to. Realize that loving me means living in a gilded cage, with guards at every door, and enemies waiting for any sign of weakness. And I think when that day comes, you're going to leave, and it will destroy me. I saw it then, the real fear underneath everything else. Not that his men would question him, or that his enemies would strike, but that I would choose freedom over him. That the very thing I'd said I wanted most would be the thing that took me away. I'm not leaving, I said fiercely. But Dominic, you can't keep trying to protect me from your world while keeping me in it. It doesn't work that way. Either I'm part of this or I'm not. And if I'm part of this, that means ugly dinners with people like Victor, and meetings where old men question your judgment, and nights where you come home covered in other people's blood. I need you to let me choose that. All of it. Not just the pretty parts. He kissed me then, desperate and consuming, like he was trying to pull me into his body where I'd be safe from everything, including his own doubts. I love you, he whispered against my lips. God, help me. I love you so much it terrifies me. Then trust me, I whispered back. Trust that I love you too. Enough to stay, enough to fight, enough to be strong when you need me to be. I don't deserve you, probably not. But you've got me anyway. We stood there in the ruins of the dinner party, holding each other like we were the only solid things in a world determined to tear us apart. And outside, in the city below, I knew his enemies were watching, waiting, planning their next move. The foundation was cracking. The only question was whether our love would be strong enough to hold everything together when it finally broke. The call came at 3 a.m. I woke to Dominic's phone vibrating violently on the nightstand, his body going rigid beside me even before he answered. I'd learned to recognize that particular tension, the shift from sleeping man to lethal weapon, in half a heartbeat. Talk, he said into the phone, his voice gravelly with sleep and instantly alert. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I watched his face transform. The color draining, the muscles in his jaw flexing, the fury and fear warring in his dark eyes. Lock it down. Now. I'm on my way. He ended the call and was out of bed before I could speak, already pulling on clothes with mechanical efficiency. What happened? I asked, sitting up. Someone hit one of my legitimate businesses, the construction firm in River North. Burned it to the ground. He yanked a shirt over his head, not bothering with buttons. 3 of my men were inside, 2 dead, 1 critical. The words hit me like a physical blow. Oh my God. This is a message, Isla. A very clear message that my enemies know the legitimization makes me vulnerable, that they can hurt me by targeting the things I'm building instead of the things I've always had. He grabbed his phone, his gun, the armor of power he wore like a second skin. I have to go. Marco will be here in 5 minutes. I'm coming. With you. He froze, turning to look at me like I'd lost my mind. Absolutely not. You said I needed to be part of this world or not part of it at all. You said I couldn't have it both ways. I threw off the covers and started dressing, my hands shaking but determined. This is part of it. Your men died. I'm coming. Isla. Are you going to lock me in this penthouse like a prisoner? Or are you going to trust that I can handle seeing what your world actually looks like? I pulled on jeans and a sweater, my heart pounding but my resolve absolute. I love you, Dominic. All of you. The parts that build things and the parts that burn them down. Let me be there. For a moment, I thought he'd refuse. Thought he'd call Marco and have me confined to the apartment for my own good. But then something shifted in his expression, resignation or respect, or maybe just exhaustion. Stay close to me, he said quietly. Don't leave my sight. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. The construction site was exactly as devastating as I'd imagined. Fire trucks still sprayed water on the smoking remains of what had been a 6-story building. Police cars blocked off the street, their lights painting everything in harsh red and blue. And everywhere, Dominic's men, dozens of them, maybe 100, standing in tight clusters with expressions that promised violence. Dominic's second in command, a man named Tony who I'd met briefly, approached as soon as we arrived. He was in his 50s, built like a brick wall, with the kind of scarred hands that suggested a violent past. "Boss," he nodded to me. "Miss Bennett." "Report," Dominic said, his voice clipped and cold. "Accelerant was used. Started on the 3rd floor where we keep the offices. Marcus and Joey were inside running night security. They never made it out. Luca got out, but he's at Northwestern with 2nd-degree burns over 40% of his body. Tony's jaw was tight. Fire department's calling it arson, but they're being careful about official statements. We think it was the Colombo family." "Why Colombo?" "They've been pushing into construction contracts. We turned down a partnership with them 3 weeks ago because you wanted to keep things clean. This is payback." Dominic went very still. "They killed my men because I wouldn't work with them? And because they know you're trying to go legit. Makes you a target for anyone who profits from the old ways." Tony glanced at me briefly. "Sir, maybe we should discuss this somewhere more private." "No." Dominic's hand found mine, squeezing tight. "Isla stays. She has as much right to know what's happening as anyone." "Marcus had a family?" "Wife and 2 kids. Joey was single. Luca's married, no kids." I watched Dominic process this. Watched the weight of those lives settle onto his shoulders like physical stones. Take care of Marcus's family. Everything. Set up a trust for the kids. College paid for. House paid off. Joey's parents send them $100,000. And make sure Luca has the best doctors. Around-the-clock care. I want updates every hour. Already handled, boss. Good. Dominic released my hand and stepped forward, his voice rising to carry across the crowd of men. "Listen up. This was an attack not just on our business, but on our future. The Colombo family thinks they can intimidate us into staying in the mud with them. They're wrong." The men pressed closer, their faces hard. "We've been playing nice," Dominic continued, "trying to transition away from the old ways, build something legitimate. But that doesn't make us weak. It makes us strategic." His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. "And anyone who mistakes strategy for weakness is about to learn a very painful lesson." A rumble of agreement from the crowd. "Here's what's going to happen. Tony, you're going to reach out to the Colombo family and request a sit-down. Make it formal, traditional. Tell them I want to discuss the attack." Tony frowned. "Boss, you're not actually going to negotiate with them after they killed our men?" "No." Dominic's smile was terrifying. "I'm going to give them a chance to apologize and make restitution. And when they refuse, because they will refuse, I'm going to remind them exactly why the Moretti family has run this city for 4 generations." He turned to the crowd. "We do this smart. We do this clean. And we do this in a way that sends a message to every family in Chicago. We're transitioning to legitimate business. But that doesn't mean we've forgotten how to fight. In fact, it means we fight smarter, harder, and more ruthlessly than we ever did before." The men roared their approval. And I saw it clearly, the leader they followed. The man who could inspire loyalty through both fear and respect. This wasn't the Dominic who cooked me pasta and read poetry in bed. This was the head of the Moretti family, commanding an army with the ease of someone born to power. And I was terrified by how attractive I found it. We stayed for 2 hours while Dominic coordinated the response: police statements, insurance claims, security upgrades. He spoke to every man there, remembered their names and families, made them feel seen and valued. This was leadership stripped to its essence. Being present, being decisive, showing strength when everyone else was afraid. When we finally returned to the penthouse just before dawn, exhaustion and adrenaline warring in equal measure, Dominic collapsed onto the couch and pulled me down beside him. "You shouldn't have seen that," he said quietly. "I needed to see that." I curled against him, breathing in the smell of smoke and stress and him. "You were incredible, Dominic. The way you handled everything. The way you took care of your men. That's who you are. Not a monster. A leader. I'm going to kill people for this. Isla. Multiple people. The Colombo family will refuse my sit-down offer, and I will respond with overwhelming force. There will be blood. Probably a lot of it. I know. And you're okay with that? With loving a man who solves problems with violence?" I pulled back to look at him. "I'm not okay with violence. I'll never be okay with violence. But I understand that in your world, sometimes violence is the language people speak. And I trust that you'll do what you need to do to keep your people safe." I touched his face. "That's the difference between you and your father, isn't it? He used violence for control. You use it for protection. Sometimes the line between the two is very thin. Maybe, but you see the line. That's what matters. He kissed me then, soft and almost broken, like I was the only solid thing in his universe. I don't deserve you, he whispered against my lips. Stop saying that. You deserve love just like everyone else. You deserve happiness. You deserve a future that isn't stained with your father's legacy. I held him tighter, and I'm going to be here to help you build it, even when it's ugly, even when it's terrifying, even when your world tries to tear us apart. The Columbos will come after you next. They'll figure out the best way to hurt me is through you. Then you'll protect me, and I'll trust you to protect me. That's how this works. He studied me for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. The sit-down is in 3 days, at a neutral location, heavily guarded. If they accept, I'll bring you with me. I blinked. You want me there? I want you to see all of it. The negotiations, the posturing, the moment when I make the choice between peace and war. If you're going to be part of this life, you need to understand what it actually means. His jaw tightened. And I need to know if you can handle it. Before we go any further, it was a test, maybe the final test. He was giving me a chance to see the absolute worst of his world and choose whether to stay. Okay, I said simply. I'll be there, even knowing that what you see might change how you feel about me. Nothing will change how I feel about you, Dominic, because I already see you clearly. I kissed him, soft and certain. All of you. And I'm choosing to stay anyway. He pulled me into his arms then, holding me so tight it almost hurt, and I felt him shaking with relief or fear or love. I couldn't tell. Outside, the city was waking up to news of the fire, of 2 more deaths in the endless war between Chicago's families, of violence disguised as business, and business disguised as violence. And in 3 days, I would sit beside Dominic Moretti and watch him either negotiate peace or declare war. The foundation wasn't just cracking anymore. It was about to shatter completely. The only question was whether we'd survive the fall. The restaurant was called Il Padrino, the Godfather, which felt either deeply ironic or perfectly on the nose. It sat in neutral territory on the outskirts of Chicago, a single-story building that looked innocuous from the outside, but was, according to Tony, fortified like a goddamn bank vault. I'd dressed carefully for this, a black dress that was elegant but not provocative, heels that I could run in if necessary, my hair pulled back in a simple twist. Dominic had looked at me for a long moment when I emerged from the bedroom, something unreadable in his expression. Last chance to stay home, he'd said. I'm coming. Isla, I am coming. I'd met his eyes without flinching. We're past the point of you protecting me from reality, remember? So now I sat in the back of his armored SUV, flanked by Tony and another guard named Marco, different from the Boston Marco who'd questioned Dominic's leadership, while Dominic reviewed documents on his tablet with the focused intensity of a general preparing for battle. The Colombo family will bring at least 6 men, Tony explained to me in a low voice. Protocol says we match numbers. Dom, me, Marco, 3 others, and you. And if things go badly, then we shoot our way out and hope the armor holds. He said it so casually I almost thought he was joking, but his hand rested on the gun holstered at his hip, and his eyes never stopped scanning our surroundings. The restaurant's parking lot was already full when we arrived, expensive cars arranged in careful formation, men in dark suits standing at attention. I counted at least 20 armed guards visible, and probably twice that many hidden. This wasn't a dinner meeting. This was a powder keg waiting for a spark. Dominic helped me out of the SUV, his hand warm and steady on my elbow. Stay beside me, he murmured. Don't speak unless spoken to. And Isla? No matter what they say, no matter what you hear, don't react. Poker face the entire time. I can do that. I know you can. That's why you're here. The interior of Il Padrino was surprisingly elegant, all dark wood and leather, with a single long table set for 12. Soft music played from hidden speakers. Candles flickered. It would have been romantic if not for the dozen armed men and the palpable tension that made the air feel thick. The Colombo family was already seated. At the head of the table sat Vincent Colombo, mid-60s, silver hair, expensive suit, and eyes like a shark's. He stood as we entered, his smile pleasant and completely devoid of warmth. Dominic, so good of you to accept my invitation. Vincent. Dominic's voice was neutral. I believe it was my invitation, actually. Details. Vincent gestured to the seats opposite. Please, sit. Let's break bread like civilized men. Dominic held my chair, a gesture of old-world courtesy that felt strange given the circumstances, and took his own seat beside me. Tony and Marco flanked us. Across the table, Vincent sat with his own guards arranged like chess pieces. "I don't believe I've had the pleasure," Vincent said, his attention sliding to me like oil. "This must be the famous Isla Bennett, the literature student who's captured our dear Dominic's heart." "Miss Bennett," I corrected quietly. "And I prefer not to be discussed like I'm not in the room." Vincent's eyebrows rose. "Spirit. I like that. Dominic always did have excellent taste in women. Though I must say, bringing a civilian to a business meeting is unconventional." "Miss Bennett is family," Dominic said flatly. "Everything discussed here concerns her. Now, shall we stop pretending this is a social call and address why we're actually here?" "Of course." Vincent leaned back, his smile fading. "The construction fire. Unfortunate business. I was devastated to hear about your losses. 2 men dead, 1 critically injured. My building destroyed. Hundreds of thousands in damages." Dominic's voice was cold as winter. "And you're calling it unfortunate business? Well, what else would you call it? An accident, surely. These things happen in construction. Accelerants, electrical fires, careless workers." Vincent spread his hands. "Tragic, but hardly criminal." The table went silent. "So that's your position?" Dominic said quietly. "Deny involvement completely. I can hardly be involved in something I knew nothing about." "Interesting, because I have 3 witnesses who saw your men at the site 2 hours before the fire started. I have security footage of a Colombo vehicle circling the block. And I have a very reliable source who says you ordered the hit personally." Vincent's pleasant mask cracked slightly. "Careful with accusations like that, Dominic. Slander can be very dangerous. Not as dangerous as burning down my buildings and killing my men." Dominic leaned forward, and I felt the violence radiating off him like heat. "Here's what's going to happen, Vincent. You're going to admit you ordered the attack. You're going to apologize formally, in front of all these witnesses. You're going to pay restitution, $2 million for each death, $5 million for damages, and another $1 million for Luca's medical care. And you're going to guarantee in writing that you will never target Moretti interests again. Or what?" Vincent's voice was sharp now, the pleasantness completely gone. "Or I will end you." Dominic's voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. The threat was absolute. "Not just you, Vincent, your entire organization. Every business, every operation, every asset you've spent 30 years building. I will dismantle the Colombo family brick by brick until there's nothing left but memory and warning. And I will do it in a way that makes everyone in Chicago understand. The Morettis are done being patient with people who mistake our legitimization for weakness." The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. "You're threatening war," Vincent said softly. "Over 2 men in a building? I'm promising justice. Whether that becomes war depends entirely on your next words." Vincent stared at Dominic for a long moment, and I could see the calculation happening. The weighing of pride against pragmatism, of saving face versus saving his empire. Finally, he laughed a harsh, bitter sound. "You've changed, Dominic. Your father would have come in here with guns blazing, would have put a bullet in my head before dessert was served. But you sit here making ultimatums like some corporate CEO, like you're better than the rest of us." He stood abruptly. "I'm not apologizing. I'm not paying restitution. And I'm certainly not bowing to the Moretti family just because you've decided to play legitimate businessmen." "Then we're done here." Dominic stood as well, pulling me gently to my feet. "You've made your choice, Vincent. Now live with the consequences." "Is that a threat?" "No." Dominic's smile was terrible to see. "That's a promise. By this time next week, you'll wish you'd taken my offer. And after that, you'll cease to exist in any meaningful way. Enjoy your final days, Vincent. They're numbered." We turned to leave, Tony and Marco forming a protective wall around us, when Vincent called out, "One more thing, Dominic." We stopped. "That pretty little civilian you brought with you, the one you're so determined to protect?" Vincent's voice dripped with malice. "She's the reason you're soft now. She's the reason you negotiate instead of act. And she's going to be the reason you lose everything. Because the moment I leave this restaurant, every family in Chicago is going to know that the great Dominic Moretti can be controlled through his girlfriend. And then the real war begins." I felt Dominic tense beside me, felt the barely leashed violence coiling in his muscles. This was the moment. The choice between walking away and burning it all down. I grabbed his hand, squeezed tight. He looked down at me, and I saw everything warring in his eyes, rage and love and fear and determination. "Let's go." I whispered. He's not worth it. For a long moment, I thought he wouldn't listen. Thought he'd pull his gun and end it here, consequences be damned. But then he nodded once and turned away from Vincent Colombo, walking out of Il Padrino with his head high and his hand in mine. The drive back was silent, tense. Dominic stared out the window while Tony made phone calls in rapid Italian, his voice low and urgent. I held Dominic's hand and watched Chicago slide past, knowing that everything had just changed. We weren't preparing for war anymore. War had already begun. Back at the penthouse, Dominic dismissed everyone and pulled me into his bedroom, closing the door with a quiet click. "Say it," he said, his back to me. "Say what you're thinking." "I'm thinking Vincent was right," I said quietly. "I am the reason you're different now, the reason you negotiate instead of just killing. And I'm going to be used against you." He turned to face me, his expression raw. "Do you regret that?" "No." I crossed to him, taking his face in my hands. "Because the version of you that negotiates first, that builds instead of destroys, that tries to be better than your history, that's the man I love. That's the man who deserves a future. And if being with me makes you that man, then I'm glad, even if it's dangerous, even if it makes you a target." "Vincent's going to come after you," Dominic said. "Hard. And he's going to be public about it to prove his point. Then we'll be ready. Isla, stop. Stop trying to protect me from this. We passed that point the moment I walked into that restaurant with you." I kissed him fiercely. "I knew what this would cost. I'm choosing it anyway. Choosing you anyway. So stop asking me if I'm sure and start trusting that I know exactly what I'm doing." He pulled me against him then, burying his face in my hair, and I felt him shaking. "I love you," he whispered. "God, I love you so much it terrifies me. And the thought of losing you, of them hurting you to get to me. You won't lose me. I'm not going anywhere. Promise me." "I promise." We stood there holding each other while outside. His phone rang constantly, his men assembled, and the city prepared for the bloodbath that was coming. The sit-down had failed, the war had started, and I was standing in the center of it, choosing love over safety, choosing him over freedom. It should have felt like a mistake. Instead, it felt like the only honest choice I'd ever made. The attack came at dawn. I woke to the sound of breaking glass, and Dominic's body covering mine, shoving me off the bed and onto the floor in one fluid motion. Gunfire erupted sharp cracks that seemed impossibly loud even through the penthouse's reinforced walls. "Stay down," Dominic ordered, already moving toward the nightstand where he kept his gun. "Don't move until I tell you." More gunfire, shouting. The sound of boots thundering through the penthouse. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst, and I pressed myself flat against the floor, making myself as small as possible. Dominic moved with lethal grace, checking his weapon, his face a mask of cold fury. He pressed a button on his phone and barked orders. "Building secured? Good. Hold positions. I'm coming out." "Dominic, wait. Stay here." He looked back at me, and the fear in his eyes was devastating. "Please, Isla, just stay here and stay down. I'll come back for you." Then he was gone, and I was alone with the sound of my own terrified breathing. It felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The gunfire stopped. The shouting faded. Silence settled over the penthouse like snow, beautiful and terrible. I stayed pressed to the floor, every muscle locked, wondering if the next sound would be Dominic returning or his enemies finding me. The bedroom door opened. I looked up, ready to see strangers with guns, ready to face whatever came next. But it was Dominic. He was covered in blood splattered across his face, soaking through his shirt, and his expression was something I'd never seen before. Not anger, not fear, something darker and more primal. Triumph. "It's over," he said quietly. "They're all dead." I stood on shaking legs. "How many?" "6. Made it past the lobby. 3 more were taken out by perimeter security." He set his gun on the dresser with careful precision. "None of them made it past the second security checkpoint. You were never in real danger. The penthouse is built like a fortress. You're covered in blood." "I know." He looked down at himself like he was seeing the blood for the first time. "I need to shower. But first." He crossed to me and pulled me into his arms, not seeming to care that he was getting blood all over me. "Are you okay? Am I okay? You just fought off 9 armed men. 10. 1 more in the stairwell." His arms tightened around me. "This is my fault. I should have anticipated Vincent would move this fast, this aggressively. Should have had better security, more men. You had plenty of security. They didn't even make it to this floor. I pulled back enough to look at him. Stop blaming yourself for other people's violence. It's going to get worse before it gets better, Isla. Vincent made a public play and failed. That makes him look weak. He'll escalate. Then we'll be ready for the escalation. We? He searched my face. After this morning, after waking up to gunfire and blood, you're still saying we? What did you think would happen? That I'd run? That I'd blame you? I cupped his blood-spattered face. I chose this, Dominic. I chose you. And I'm not so fragile that a little violence is going to break me. This wasn't a little violence. This was an assassination attempt. Which failed. Because you're brilliant and prepared and you have loyal men who would die for you. I kissed him, tasting copper and smoke. So stop waiting for me to leave and start believing that I'm staying. He kissed me back then, fierce and desperate, his blood-covered hands tangling in my hair. We stumbled toward the shower, shedding clothes, and I helped him wash the blood away, other people's blood, enemies' blood, the evidence of violence committed in my name. Under the hot water, pressed against the cool tile, he claimed me with an intensity that bordered on desperation. This wasn't gentle lovemaking. This was reassurance and possession, and the primal need to confirm we were both still alive. His hands gripped my hips hard enough to bruise, his teeth marked my shoulder, and when I cried out it was with pleasure and pain and the overwhelming relief of survival. After, wrapped in his bathrobe and drinking coffee that Tony had somehow managed to prepare despite the chaos, Dominic laid out the new reality. Vincent sent that team as a message. He wanted to kill me, ideally, but even failing to do that, he's proven he can penetrate my defenses. That makes him look strong to the other families. Dominic's jaw was tight. So now I need to respond with overwhelming force. Something that makes it clear the Morettis are not to be trifled with. What does that mean? It means I'm going to systematically dismantle his organization. His restaurants, his warehouses, his fronts, all of it. I'm going to make it so expensive and painful to be Vincent Colombo's ally that everyone abandons him. And then when he's alone and vulnerable, I'm going to give him one last chance to surrender. And if he doesn't? Dominic met my eyes, and his were absolutely merciless. Then I end him. Publicly. In a way that ensures no one ever questions Moretti power again. I should have been horrified. Should have protested the brutality of it. But after this morning, after waking to the sound of men trying to kill the person I loved most in the world, I found I had no sympathy left for Vincent Colombo. How long will this take? I asked instead. A week. Maybe 2. I'll move fast and decisively. Cut off his supply lines, turn his allies, make him understand he made a fatal mistake. Dominic reached across the table and took my hand. And during that time, you stay here. Full security, around the clock. I can't risk. No. He blinked. No? I'm not hiding in this penthouse for 2 weeks while you fight a war on my behalf. Either I'm part of this or I'm not. You don't get to include me in the dangerous parts and then lock me away when it's convenient. Isla, this isn't about convenience. This is about keeping you alive. Then keep me alive by letting me be with you. By letting me see what you're doing and understand the choices you're making. I squeezed his hand. I'm not asking to be in the line of fire. I'm asking to be by your side. There's a difference. He studied me for a long moment, conflict written across his face. You realize what you're asking? To witness things that you can't unknow? To be present for violence and negotiations and decisions that might haunt you? Yes. And you're still sure? I've never been more sure of anything. I stood and moved around the table to him, settling onto his lap and wrapping my arms around his neck. I love you, Dominic Moretti. All of you. The parts that build, hospitals and fund scholarships, and the parts that burn down enemy operations and execute men who threaten your family. I want all of it. The beautiful and the brutal. So stop trying to protect me from who you really are. He buried his face in my neck, his breath hot against my skin. You're going to see things that will change how you look at me. Then that's a risk we'll take together. For 3 days I watched Dominic wage war with surgical precision. He moved through Chicago like a force of nature, striking at Colombo interests with calculated efficiency. A restaurant burned. A warehouse was raided by federal agents who suddenly had detailed information about illegal shipments. 3 of Vincent's top lieutenants were arrested on charges ranging from money laundering to assault. Bank accounts were frozen. Supply chains were disrupted. Allies quietly withdrew their support. And through it all, Dominic never raised his voice, never seemed to lose control. He simply executed his plan with the methodical focus of a chess master clearing the board. I was present for most of it, sitting in on meetings with his senior men, watching him negotiate with allies, seeing the respect and fear his name commanded. And yes, there were moments that were brutal, moments when I had to look away, moments when the reality of what loving him meant hit me like a physical blow. But I stayed. On the fourth day, Vincent Colombo requested a meeting, not a formal sit-down this time, but a private conversation. Just him and Dominic. It was obviously a trap. "I'm going," Dominic said, checking his weapons with practiced efficiency. He wants to negotiate surrender, probably. Or he wants to kill me face to face and restore his honor. Either way, this ends tonight. "Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. This is non-negotiable," I finished. "You said I could be by your side. That includes the dangerous parts. Especially the dangerous parts." We stared at each other, wills locked. Finally, Dominic sighed. "You wear a vest. You stay behind me at all times. And if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. Deal." The meeting was set for midnight in an abandoned factory on the South Side classic mob movie territory. Tony thought the whole thing screamed ambush. Marco agreed. But Dominic insisted on going, bringing a small army of men as backup, but meeting Vincent essentially alone. "This is how these things end," he explained to me during the drive. "With a conversation between men who understand the stakes. If I bring an army into the meeting itself, it's an insult. But if I show up alone except for you," he smiled grimly, "that sends a different message. That I'm confident enough in my victory that I don't need dozens of men to feel safe." The factory was exactly as ominous as expected, all shadows and echoing spaces and the smell of rust and decay. Our men secured the perimeter while Dominic and I walked into the main floor, where Vincent waited with just 2 guards. Vincent looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his expensive suit hanging loose, his face haggard. The confident shark from the restaurant was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. "Dominic," he said hoarsely. "And Miss Bennett. I'm surprised you brought her. Where I go, she goes." Dominic's arm slid around my waist, pulling me close. "You wanted to talk, Vincent. So talk. I want to end this. The war, the violence, all of it. You've made your point. I underestimated you, and I'm willing to admit it. Admission isn't enough. You killed 2 of my men. You attacked my home. You threatened the woman I love." Dominic's voice was absolutely cold. "So here are your options. You can leave Chicago, permanently, sell your interests, take your money, and disappear. Never come back. Never do business here again. Or I kill you right now and scatter your organization to the winds. Your choice." Vincent swallowed hard. "And if I leave? My men, my operations, what happens to them? Your men pledge loyalty to me or they leave with you. Your operations become Moretti operations. Everything you've built becomes mine." Dominic stepped forward. "That's the price, Vincent. Your legacy in exchange for your life. Choose quickly." The factory went silent except for the distant sound of wind through broken windows. "I choose life," Vincent said finally, his voice breaking. "I'll leave Chicago. Tonight. You'll never see me again." "Smart man." Dominic nodded to Tony, who'd appeared from the shadows. "Escort Mr. Colombo to the airport. Make sure he actually gets on a plane. And Vincent, if I ever see you in my city again, I'll kill you on sight. Understood?" "Understood." Just like that, it was over. The war that had consumed weeks, that had cost lives and blood and fear, ended with a conversation in an abandoned factory and a broken man choosing exile over death. We walked out into the Chicago night, Dominic's hand in mine, while behind us Vincent Colombo was escorted to his final departure. "Is it really over?" I asked quietly. "For now. There will be other challenges, other enemies. But this particular war? Yes, it's over." He stopped and turned to face me, his hands coming up to cup my face. "You stayed. Through all of it, the violence, the fear, the ugliness, you stayed. I told you I would. I know. But I think some part of me didn't believe it. Didn't believe anyone could see me that clearly and still choose me." His thumbs brushed away tears I hadn't realized were falling. "I love you, Isla Bennett. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I won't regret it. Ever." He kissed me there in the shadows of the factory, surrounded by the ghost of violence and the promise of peace. and I knew with absolute certainty that this was where I belonged. Not despite the danger, but because of it. Because loving Dominic Moretti meant being brave enough to face the darkness and trust that we could find light together. The fire that forges doesn't destroy. It transforms. And I was ready to be transformed. 6 months later, I stood in the library Dominic had built for me now, overflowing with books, papers, and the organized chaos of a woman rediscovering her passion for literature, and watched the sunrise paint Chicago in shades of gold and rose. The city looked different now. Not safer, necessarily, but mine. Ours. Coffee, Dominic said, appearing in the doorway with 2 steaming mugs. He was dressed for the office, all sharp suit and elegant power, but his hair was still damp from the shower and his feet were bare. You've been up for hours. Couldn't sleep. Too excited. I accepted the coffee and gestured to the papers spread across my desk. I got the offer. His entire face transformed. Northwestern? Full-time position in their literature department, teaching and research, starting next fall. I could barely contain my smile. I'm going to be a professor, Dominic. Actually using my degree. Contributing something to the world beyond serving champagne to people who don't deserve it. He set down his coffee and pulled me into his arms, spinning me around with a laugh that was pure joy. I'm so proud of you. So goddamn proud. This is everything you wanted, isn't it? The freedom to choose your own path. It's exactly what I wanted. I kissed him, soft and lingering. Thank you. For giving me the space to figure out what that path looked like. For not trying to control it or shape it into something that served you. Thank you for staying long enough to figure it out. He set me down but kept his arms around me. I know these months haven't been easy. The scrutiny, the whispers, the way people look at you when they find out who you're with. That was true. Dating Dominic Moretti meant living in a fishbowl, every action dissected by the press and social media. I was called everything from gold digger to mob princess, with very little consideration for the actual person I was. But I'd learned to ignore the noise, to focus on what mattered. They can say whatever they want, I said. I know the truth. I know who you are, who we are together. That's enough. Speaking of who we are together, he released me and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. I was planning to wait until tonight. Had reservations at that restaurant you love, flowers, the whole elaborate production. But standing here, in the library I built for you, watching you celebrate achieving your dreams, this feels like the right moment. My breath caught. He opened the box, revealing a ring that was both elegant and unusual, an emerald the color of my eyes. Surrounded by diamonds, set in platinum that caught the morning light. Isla Marie Bennett, he said, his voice steady but his hands shaking slightly. You saw me at my worst and chose me anyway. You stood beside me through a war. You forced me to be better, braver, more honest than I ever thought possible. You gave me something I never thought I'd have, a future worth fighting for. He took my hand. I'm asking you to make that future permanent, to marry me, to be my wife, my partner, my home, to build something beautiful out of all this chaos we've survived. I was crying now, messy tears that blurred the room into watercolors. Yes, God, yes, 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto my finger, a perfect fit, because of course he'd had it sized, and kissed me with the kind of desperate relief that suggested he hadn't been entirely sure of my answer. I love you, he murmured against my lips. So much it terrifies me. But the good kind of terrified. The kind that makes me want to be better every single day. I love you too, all of you. The dangerous parts and the gentle parts and everything in between. We stood there, wrapped in each other while the sun finished rising, painting the library in light that felt like a blessing. My phone buzzed with a text from Gabriella. He proposed yet? Tell him if he chickens out, I'm disowning him. I laughed and showed Dominic, who rolled his eyes. My sister has no faith in me. Your sister loves you and wants you to be happy. I am happy. For the first time in my life, I'm actually completely happy. He pulled me close again. You gave me that, Isla. You gave me hope that I could be more than my father's legacy. More than violence and power and fear. You made me believe I could build something real. We built it together. I corrected. That's the whole point. This isn't you saving me or me fixing you. This is two people choosing each other despite all the reasons they shouldn't. Choosing love even when it's complicated and dangerous and completely insane. So you're admitting it's insane? Oh, it's absolutely insane. I'm engaged to a man who runs half of Chicago's underworld and can order people killed with a phone call. My future mother-in-law died when I was 5, and my future father-in-law was a sociopath. Our wedding will require more security than a presidential inauguration. Our children... I stopped, suddenly aware of what I'd said. Dominic's eyes went very dark, very intense. Children? I mean, eventually. Maybe, if that's something you want. We haven't really talked about. He kissed me silent. I want everything with you. Marriage, children, growing old together. The whole impossible, beautiful dream. I want to build a family that's nothing like the one I came from. I want to give our kids the childhood I never had. Safety, love, the freedom to choose their own paths. I want. He paused, his voice going rough. I want to be the man you see when you look at me. The man who deserves you. You already are that man, Dominic. You've been that man since the night you asked me what I wanted most and actually listened to the answer. We spent the rest of the morning tangled in each other, celebrating with the kind of intimacy that was both physical and emotional. This was what freedom really meant, I realized. Not the absence of constraints or obligations, but the choice to bind yourself to someone completely, knowing they would never use those bonds to cage you. That afternoon, while Dominic was in meetings coordinating the latest phase of legitimizing family operations, I called my best friend Sarah, who I'd drifted away from during the hardest years of my mother's illness, and told her everything. Let me get this straight, she said after a long pause. You're engaged to Dominic Moretti, the Dominic Moretti, mob boss, alleged criminal, one of the most dangerous men in Chicago. Yes, and you're happy, deliriously. Then, I'm happy for you. Her voice softened. Isla, I know I haven't been the best friend lately. I should have been there more when your mom was sick, when you were struggling. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Life happens. We drift apart. But I'd like to drift back together. If you're open to that. I'm going to need help planning a wedding that's simultaneously elegant and requires extensive security screening for all guests. She laughed. I'm in. But I have one question. Is he really as scary as everyone says? I thought about Dominic the night we'd confronted Vincent Colombo. The cold fury in his eyes, the absolute certainty with which he'd dismantled an enemy, the blood on his hands and the calculated violence he was capable of. But I also thought about the way he read poetry to me in bed. The gentle way he touched me, like I was something precious he was afraid of breaking. The hours he spent planning security for my new teaching position, because he wanted me to pursue my dreams without fear. Scarier, I said honestly, but also gentler than you'd imagine. He's complicated, but I love him for all of it, the scary parts and the soft parts. Then he's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him too. Trust me on that. That evening, Dominic threw an engagement party at the Tan, penthouse intimate by his standards, which meant only 50 people. His sister flew in from California and spent the entire night crying happy tears and telling everyone who would listen how proud she was. Tony made a toast about how Dominic had been insufferable for months, and thank God I'd agreed to marry him so the rest of them didn't have to suffer anymore. Even Marco, the old guard consigliere who'd questioned my influence, raised his glass and welcomed me formally to the family. I stood on the balcony watching the party, watching all these dangerous, complicated people who'd become my family, and felt the weight of the past 6 months settle into something like peace. Penny for your thoughts, Dominic said, joining me with a glass of champagne. Just thinking about that first night at Aurelio's, when you asked me what I wanted most and I said freedom. I leaned against him. I had no idea what I was asking for. Thought it meant escaping debt and maybe traveling somewhere beautiful. Never imagined it would mean this. Regrets? Not one. I turned to face him fully. You gave me freedom, Dominic. Not by paying my debts or giving me helicopters or any of the material things. You gave me freedom by seeing me clearly and loving me anyway. By letting me see you clearly and trusting me not to run. By building a life where we can both be exactly who we are, complicated, imperfect, sometimes scary, and still choose each other every single day. You're going to make me cry at my own engagement party. Good. You should cry more. It's humanizing. He laughed and pulled me into his arms. And we stood there, wrapped in each other while behind us the party continued. His world and my world merged into something new. Something that belonged to both of us. 6 months ago, I was a waitress drowning in debt and impossible dreams, serving champagne to people who'd never see me as human. Now I was Isla Bennett, soon to be Isla Moretti, professor of literature, fiancé of Chicago's most dangerous man. Woman who'd faced down violence and fear and chosen love despite every logical reason not to. The helicopter keys had been just the beginning, a symbol of freedom Dominic wanted to give me. But the real freedom came from something much simpler. Being known completely and loved anyway. That's what he'd given me. What we'd given each other. And no amount of danger or chaos or complicated mob politics could take that away. I love you, I whispered into the Chicago night, into the party noise and the laughter and the life we were building together. I love you too, Dominic replied. Forever. And I believed him, because some promises, when made by dangerous men to brave women, are written in something stronger than blood. They're written in the choice to be vulnerable with someone who could destroy you, but chooses instead to set you free. That's the real magic of love. Not that it saves us, but that it transforms us into people brave enough to save ourselves. Together.